Leather is actually the most sustainable material available to us as consumers. It's a byproduct of the food industry, meaning no animals are harmed specifically for their hides. And if not used, these hides would become waste and be incinerated, contributing to CO2 emissions.
This is Randi Seiff, my guest on this episode of Create Tomorrow. I'm your host, Lisa White, Director of Strategic Forecasting at WGSN. And today we are going full leather, the sustainable way. Because in this episode, we're looking at something called Ecotan Leather. And Ecotan Leather has invented a more sustainable way to use leather as a design material. Where normal leather has been tanned using a process involving conventional chemicals like chrome, Ecotan Leather is made with sustainable plant-based tanning products. But let's get back to our guest, Randi Seiff, and let me introduce her properly. She's a representative for Ecotan Leather in the US, and she's also the CEO and co-founder of Treun House Atelier. Welcome, Randi. Please start by explaining your role a little bit better than I just did. What is Treun House Atelier, and how did you come to work with Ecotan Leather?
Yeah, sure. So Treun, as we say, is a global impact luxury brand. And we sit at the intersection of sustainability, fashion, and technology. And we treat the planet as a stakeholder, really. And we develop all of our own proprietary materials and packaging for the luxury market with circularity as a key driver in the whole design process. We'll be launching next year, 2025. And I came to meet Ecotan Leather while sourcing a more sustainable leather solution for our leather sneakers.
Oh, wow. So before we hear about that, I'd like to dive into the leather making process. And we've always needed to tan leather before we can use it to prevent it from rotting and decaying. So why is the conventional chemical-based tanning process so harmful to nature? Can you give us that background?
Yeah, sure. So the conventional leather tanning typically relies on chemicals coming from non-renewable resources. For example, metals like chrome, which can potentially result in hazardous waste. And these chemicals are not biodegradable or compostable, meaning that if they're not properly managed, they can harm plant life and disrupt ecosystems. And then when these chemicals end up in the soil or our waterways, they can potentially contaminate the environment, contributing to long-term damage to biodiversity and to human health.
We've seen a lot of what that looks like, actually, when you're looking at waterways that have been contaminated by tanning and other industries. So if Ecotan Leather is a method that's more sustainable, how does it work exactly? How is it, revolutionizing the tanning process in a more sustainable way?
Yeah, so first of all, Ecotan is an all-in-one leather tanning technology, right? So it's used for the leather tanning process, made in Italy. Ecotan leather is completely free of heavy metals, and it's 100% metal-free. And secondly, it does not contain any harmful substances like chrome or glutaraldehyde. Instead, Ecotan leather takes its inspiration from nature and uses natural ingredients such as plant-based tannins, which are sourced from renewable materials like plants, like trees, such as chestnuts, quebracho, gallnut, tara, and olive extract. And these natural ingredients used during the tanning process ensure that Ecotan leather is not only safe for humans and the environment, but they're also highly bio-based. And as a result, the leather can easily be repurposed for multiple second life paths, including the transformation into biofertilizer or compost or biochar, helping to close that loop towards a more circular economy and return valuable nutrients to the earth. It's something that really blew me away is Ecotan actually has their own forests. For example, the chestnut forest in Italy, which, by the way, is deforestation-free and PEFC certified, or the quebracho forest in Argentina, or their tara from Peru. So Ecotan extracts the ingredients to tan the leather from the trees in these forests.
What happens when a product made of Ecotan leather comes to the end of a life cycle? For example, heaven forbid, somebody actually throws away a jacket made of Ecotan leather. What happens then?
So when a product made with Ecotan leather reaches the end of its use, it can be repurposed or biodegraded. The leather actually can be transformed into a biofertilizer, like you just mentioned, releasing healthy nutrients back to the soil. And this means that the leather can be separated from the other materials in that product and reused. And there are several recyclers in the marketplace already doing this kind of work, disassembling the products.
What has led you to your interest in net zero fashion?
So this goes way back to when I started in the fashion business, which I've been in for, I'll say, more years than we can count on our fingers and toes together. I always had a huge frustration with the fashion industry because every season we had to come out with a new collection, whether you needed it or not. You had to come out with a new collection, and that collection was never that different from the season before. So in my mind, that was always a big frustration because it seemed like we were creating so much waste and there was no purpose behind it. And so after 20 plus years of working for other companies, I then went on my own and started consulting with brands, formed my own company, Randi Seiff Design, and began working with brands more purposefully, I'll say. And there was always a purpose for it. And I'll say the last several years, sustainability and a mission of circularity has been becoming more and more and more apparent that it is needed to be able to achieve that net zero by 2030, which let's not even go there. But it's almost like my entire career has sort of set me up to be doing what I'm doing right now, because my experience spans from creative to strategy to now innovation for the circular economy. And one of the things that with Treun, it just hits all of my personal passions. And I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing the work that I'm doing to building these purpose-driven brands from concept to completion.
How did you come upon Ecotan? Was it something that you found online? Was it something that you found in person?
It was actually, I was walking a trade show. I'm based here in New York City, and I was attending one of the leather trade shows, which is called Atelier. It's held twice a year in New York and Milan. So I was in New York at Atelier and looking at different leathers from the different tanneries and came across their booth, literally just came across their booth at Atelier. And the more I was speaking with them, what called me over to the booth, there was a big sign that said biocircular. And that intrigued me. And so I walked over and began speaking with them. And the more I learned, I think I spent an hour at the booth that day having these in-depth conversations and learning about Ecotan. And it really blew me away. And I knew that this was, when we launched our sneaker collection and anything with leather, this is the leather we were going to use.
It was like one of those aha moments.
For sure. It's an incredible technology, and it's all backed by science. You know, it's an evolution, and it's a philosophy of creating value in the way that we design. It's a choice, right? It's a choice that designers make. It's a choice that a consumer can make, what brands they want to purchase. Do they want to purchase from brands that share the same values that they do? It's all a choice, and it's also educating the consumer to what is your product is based on.
Yeah, and I've got a question about that too, because as you're building, brand and product and material and, finished goods, do you feel that the changes for bio-based and sustainable products, do you feel that they're being driven more by the consumer or more by the industry or more by, let's just call them true believers?
I think it is a combination of all of what you just mentioned, all of the above. I think there's a certain sector of consumers that are definitely more in tune with wanting to be planet positive and shopping with brands that are using planet positive materials in their collections. At the same time, there's the quickly upcoming regulations in the EU, and then will be followed by the US down the road. It's not that far down the road. That's upcoming. And so if brands are selling in the EU, they're going to have to comply, whether they like it or not. So these are legislations that are going to be required by law for brands to follow.
You're listening to the WGSN podcast, Create Tomorrow, and today we're talking about how to make leather in a more sustainable way. I'm your host, Lisa White, Director of Strategic Forecasting at WGSN. My guest today is Randi Seiff, CEO and President and co-founder of Treun House Atelier and the representative of Ecotan Leather in the US. This is from a consumer perspective. So is Ecotan as durable as when you make leather the traditional way, considering that it can be broken down in nature in, I think you said 45 days? I mean, what happens when it rains on your sneakers?
So yes, absolutely. Ecotan leather offers the same durability as traditional leather. In fact, it has been rigorously tested and approved by automotive manufacturers, which follow some of the most stringent testing standards in the industry. And this durability makes it suitable for demanding applications like car interiors, footwear, fashion, and upholstery, really anywhere you use leather. It's also important to clarify that Ecotan's biodegradability is an industrially induced process, meaning it requires specific conditions to activate the breakdown, which would not happen in standard conditions.
Super interesting. And I wanted to know too, but when you're, going back to nature and the repurposing process, and how does this improve the carbon footprint of the product?
Usually products, when they reach the end of their life, of their useful life, meaning when the customer is finished with it, right, they end up in a landfill or are incinerated. With Ecotan leather, we can actually change the final destination and reuse these materials as ingredients of a new supply chain. As an example, Ecotan leather contributes to soil enrichment, returning valuable nutrients to the earth such as nitrogen and natural carbon. And these results are possible thanks to the naturalness of our ingredients and formulations. And then adding more good to this story, any waste that's generated during the production of the leather item can also be repurposed. As I mentioned earlier, the leather shavings from the tannery during production or the tons of scraps from the cutting rooms during the making of the actual products, all of these materials can be repurposed into new valuable resources with a zero waste philosophy across the entire supply chain.
Yeah, that's really great to know. But I want to play a little bit of the devil's advocate here. Wouldn't it be best for nature if we stopped using leather altogether as a material and instead use some sustainable materials that do not come from animals?
So, Lisa, this is a big misconception. Leather is actually the most sustainable material available to us as consumers. It's a byproduct of the food industry, meaning no animals are harmed specifically for their hides. And if not used, these hides would become waste and be incinerated, contributing to CO2 emissions. So on the contrary, our industry is transforming what would have been waste into a valuable, durable material, leather, which embodies the artisanal skills and craftsmanship of our tanners, creatively making these extraordinary collections.
So basically, as long as there is a meat industry, a leather industry makes perfect sense.
100%.
Kind of adjacent to that, you're promoting Ecotan leather in the US, and I can imagine that it might be difficult to convince manufacturers to use conventional leather because we've always done it this way. How easy or hard is it to convince the manufacturers to use Ecotan leather?
Brands with a forward-looking mentality are already engaging in this sustainable journey. And many brands are looking to see how they might add more sustainable solutions to their collections. So a great many tanners have already started to manufacture Ecotan leather for projects that brands are launching. So this transition has already started.
That's super exciting because one of the focus forecasts that we have right now is called Feel Appeal. And it's simple and complex at the same time because you are attracted to products that make you feel good. And of course, that means their color, their material, their finish. Is it something that actually is appealing to the fingers and to the eyes? But then it's also about products that make you feel good because their story makes you feel good. And it really sounds like Ecotan is something that is going in that direction.
It's a great story, because if you have a product made with Ecotan leather, let's say, and I know for us at Treun, our sneakers will be made with Ecotan. We will have a QR code right on inside the shoe that will take the user to a landing page. When they scan that QR code, we will tell them that product's journey, right? And that journey starts with the forest, with the trees, and extracting the tannins from those trees, and then goes through the leather tanning process, turns in, we sew our, cut and sew our sneakers at the factory, and then at the end of that, when the customer is finished with their sneakers, we have arranged with our end-of-life partners that the brands can work with directly around the globe, and we are adding more end-of-life partners so that this is readily available for brands to work with. And they take it back and recycle it, whether it becomes a biofertilizer or compost or biochar. It goes right back into the soil, releasing healthy nutrients into the soil that are high in nitrogen and carbon.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And, I think what's interesting as well, too, and we know from a consumer perspective that people don't always shop because they need something. Sometimes that's the case, obviously. But they also shop because they want to feel something. They want to feel confidence in the future. They want to feel excited. They want to feel enthusiastic. I don't know what it could be. When you first came upon Ecotan, how did you feel? What were the emotions that you would describe?
Oh, I was elated, because it was like, here it was, a solution that I had been looking for subconsciously, without being able to say it, without being able to put words in it, right? I didn't know such a thing existed. So when I found this and it aligned so beautifully with everything that we're doing, we are developing our own fabrics and materials and packaging, with circularity being that whole key driver in the whole design process, right? So here was a leather that really is the same exact thing. It's the same story. And so it just was a perfect alignment. And there's that interconnectedness and that red thread between Ecotan and everything else that we're doing as a brand.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interconnectedness is basically our key term for 2027. So you're very much in advance, which is perfect. And how do you think consumers are going to feel? What are the emotions that are going to be coming to the fore when a consumer, picks up a pair of Treun House sneakers made from Ecotan?
I would hope that they would feel proud, that they would feel validated, that they're doing their part to, we all know it. One person alone can't do it, right? And that is why collaboration is so important, even between brands and the rest of the supply chain, right? I mean, we operate with transparency and collaboration with all of our partners across the entire value chain as a strategic priority, because that is the only way that we're going to succeed in our goals, right? And I think the consumers need to be educated a little bit as to what they can do. I think a lot of people want to do something positive, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. So if we can at least educate them a little bit in an entertaining way, not in a boring school kind of way, but if we can tell them stories that they emotionally connect with, I think that makes them feel good, which goes back to what you were talking about earlier, that it's shopping for joy, right? You're bringing joy to somebody. They're doing good. They're feeling good because they love what they just bought, but they're also doing good.
Exactly. And one of our key emotional states for 2027 is strategic joy. And so I think that fits in really well. Thank you to my guest, Randi Seiff, Ecotan's representative in the US and CEO, president and co-founder of Treun House. Today, I've been your host, Lisa White, Director of Strategic Forecasting at WGSN. Please be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast, and thank you for listening.